Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. Human Day, written by Weirdo5255. Key, look! The older sister smiled, then extended her talon towards the molting trundling towards her across the smooth stone floor, his 3 legs pattering as he moved towards her. Yes, Ola, I see it, said Key, as she grabbed a moltling in her talons, keeping him in place. Ola puffed himself up, looking like nothing more than a ball of feathers. A beak, 3 flailing legs, and 3 waving talons. "I'm a human!" exclaimed Ola, as he grabbed the mask that was hidden somewhere in his feathers and slipped it over his face. The cheap plastic covered 2 of his eyes, leaving 2 more to glare out at his siblings awaiting approval. Key buffed her feathers in resignation. "I can see you're a human. You do have a lot of feathers, though. I didn't think they had those." The ball of feathers in question wriggled out of his sibling's grasp and fell onto the ground. "I don't have feathers. I have hair. I comb and pile it in different ways as it gets longer." To emphasize his point, Ola dragged his talons over the top of his head, causing his already messily collected feathers to stick out almost straight up. Key grinned. "Oh, there we go. Now you're most definitely a human." Ola chirped in happiness, squirmed out of his sister's grip, tumbling to the floor. The small motling carefully picked up his 3rd leg and waddled out of the center of the room, barely keeping his balance on only 2 stubby limbs. "Why can't you be that cute?" asked Key's mother, watching as her youngest motling wandered off, trilling to himself in merriment. Key indignantly fluffed her feathers out. "I'm 23, mother, and I am fairly certain that you have images of me doing far more embarrassing things." One of Key's fathers looked up from the roost in the corner of the room. "We do, but it's never the same. All grown up like you are, and we can't call you cute anymore." Key's other father let out a small whistle. "Well, we can call her beautiful. I have heard she is courting no less than 4 males at the moment." "All of whom I'm sure are far better for her than the 2 males I'm stuck with," muttered Key's mother, glaring at her mates. Key's fathers glanced at one another, and both wisely decided to say nothing. Any utterances, as she was in such a mood, would bar them both from the nest for the night, leaving them to sleep on the center room perches. Key's mother chirped in annoyance. "Key, you are not actually courting 4, are you? At your age, that is likely to lead to ruin. Keep yourself to 2. Key blanched her lower eyes, snapping closed in embarrassment. "Mother, that is none of your business. In any case, I am not courting 4 males." Key was not going to mention that the number was larger than what her mother thought, but then she was so old-fashioned, thinking that anything beyond 3 mates was scandalous. Her mother glared at her for several long moments and let out a disgruntled warble. "I don't need to know. You are right. Now, go and make sure that your brother is ready. I have feathers to pull." She turned back to the 2 males in the room, who both quickly quelled under her gaze. Key retreated, glad her fathers were so understanding and willing to cover for her. "Ola, are you ready to go?" she squawked, backing out of the center room of the main nest. Ola popped his head down from one of the higher roosts in the ceiling. "Are we leaving?" "In a moment. You need more than that mask. It's cold today. Where is your heat generator?" The mottling dropped from the high perch to the floor, landing in an uncoordinated heap. "I don't need it." Key slowly blinked 4 times. "Where is it, Ola?" Looking at his sister and seeing something of his mother in that gaze, the mottling quickly realized that he was not going to win this argument. "In my nest." "Let's go and get it then. We are going to be leaving soon as you have it." That got the mottling to move, leaping up to his feet, forgetting to pretend that he was human. Ola quickly padded on his 3 peg-like feet towards his nest at the end of the room and dove into it. Following, to ensure he did not become distracted, Key watched as he dug about in the synthetic branches and stuff that was his nest. Toys, several data pads, and a disturbing amount of food was quickly flung into the center cavity of the nest as Ola searched, flitting from one part of the nest to another in flurries of movement, only ever searching one location for a heartbeat before looking in another. Ola, I have it, cried the mottling. Pulling the cylinder out, Ola held it up and quickly strapped it to his leg. Kihi looked at the mess in the center of the small nest. First thing when we get home, you're cleaning. When we get home, let's go, said Ola, ignoring the task for the moment. Bounding forward, the mottling grabbed at the branch of Kihi's father's and dragged her back to the center of the room. Kihi glanced at a few feathers on the floor and looked at her mother, who was slowly preening herself. Both fathers were trading looks with one another, looking somewhat bemused at the posturing that they had to endure from their mate. Are we ready to go? We are ready. We're going to see a human, chirped Ola. Settling onto her perch, Kihi put a talon on Ola to ensure he remained still, which was an impossible task as he bounced up and down. Humans have only 2 eyes. How do you think they see things? Asked Ola. They seem to get by, said Kihi, distracted. She was starting to regret volunteering to take her brother forward into the limited closer seats to the stage. Her mother and fathers were further back in the stadium, not having to watch a child in the pressing crowd. Humans can consume both meat and plants. I think that's amazing. You could drop one on almost any planet and they would live, said Ola, excitedly, as he once again pulled the mask over his face. Very interesting, Ola. Now calm yourself. We need to settle in if we want to see the human. Ola's eyes widened and his feathers went flat. For a brief moment, the mottling was absolutely still, before he once again started to bounce up and down with excitement. Kihi let out a low keen and, tearing her eyes from the mottling, looked around the stadium. It was filled with her species for the most part, but nearer to the stage were several hundred aliens of varying species. He looked them over, taking in the strangeness of them for several moments. A low hum blared and their sonic boom echoed over the stadium. Humans, said Ola, before anyone else in the vicinity. The famed drop pod flared its jets and dropped into the stage with enough force to cause the metal beneath it to screech in protest for a moment. Kihi shied away from the bright flare of the rockets, but Ola, ever eager, watched. The metal pod was still for only a moment before the hatch in its front fell away, revealing a small human who slowly stepped out. The human was clad in their customary isolation suit, and raising a soft talon, it stepped out of the drop pod, its helmet reflecting the light of the day into the crowd. "Hello!" shouted the human into the microphone. The crowd let out a cheer. Sprinting through the sunlight, Kihi looked at the human. It was a male as far as she could determine, and old. The skin on its face was wrinkling and pockmarked. Scars ran down one side of its face, and the hair was wispy white. Still, it looked to have some eagerness Kihi so often saw in Ola's eyes. "I thank you for inviting me to your Human Day." The crowd let out another cheer that continued for several minutes. Kihi let herself be swept up in the merriment and joined in, shouting. As she did so, she continued to observe the human, and determined it was a male, given the lack of fat deposits on its chest. The human raised his hands and slowly lowered them, calm and quieting the crowd. Ola was now frozen in place, his eyes locked on the human. When humanity stumbled on this confederation, it was a nation only in words and theory. There was no spirit, no cooperation, no camaraderie. The species of this galaxy were together, but distinct and unchanging. The only times that many species interacted was to expand and then contest borders. The only trade being done was raw resources, rocks, minerals, elements. Those were the only things traveling between the stars. The galaxy was still cold and lifeless, each species only carving out a larger hole to wither and die in. The human began its speech, and the crowd listened, attention focused on the member of the historic species. The human stood up straighter then, the wrinkles on the face behind the clear metal tightening, lending its face more youth. So we, humanity, struck out. We tried to bring the galaxy together. Humanity was not homogeneous, and we saw no reason to be. We took pride in the fact that although the inhabitants of one planet, of one continent, one city, one household to the next, each person was different from another, and yet we were still one. The Confederation back then, when we first were traveling between the stars, did not agree. The small human let out a laugh. Yeah, the first great achievement that humanity counted was the purchasing of a scrap barge from the Giril. This planet and its inhabitants were the first species we turned to in the stars to learn about, to try and learn from. We took the scrapped vessel and pulled every bit of data we could from it. Not just the computer data, but everything we could learn, from the scratches in the floor to the arrangement of the corridors. The human looked out at the crowd. Key shifted on her feet as the human's eyes swept over her. It was disconcerting the way that humans seemed to lock eyes with an entire crowd, even with only one set of eyes. We learned that the Giril were alien, and at the same time familiar. You are not free of war, strife, problems. Like us, though, you love, you care for your families above almost anything else, and want nothing more than to raise your children and ensure their lives are better than your own. For 300 years, humanity learned, collected, and adapted. We tried to share our own culture with others and what we had learned from other aliens. No one wanted to listen. The human shook his head, causing the wrinkles on his face to move like feathers as he did so. It is not an admonishment. When I was a child, humanity was content to collect and learn, taking in the culture of 100 worlds. Some humans even dedicated entire worlds to the art of culture replication. We tried to emulate the aliens of the galaxy. We wanted to learn through experience. It was a glorious time for humanity. The human curled up his soft talons at his glove. When I was only 15, the age between child and adult for humans, and the enemy attacked. The Taui were wiped out in a day and made their famous plea to the stars for aid only when the star of their home system was consumed. The coalition government, apathetic and powerless, having never faced a threat even close to that of the enemy, was paralyzed. 1 million species for the first time trying to work together in a bid to save themselves at the cost of others. Humanity was only another alien voice shouting, beginning. He reached into a pocket in his suit and slowly drew out a small black knife. He spun it around in his hand for several moments, eyes locked on the weapon. Humanity had interacted with as many species as possible, and so we approached the Fur EU to try and form a more lasting union. A vicious, domineering species, one that respected only power and personal achievement, were the Fur EU. They are nearly double our height, and if they had any inclination for expansion through the space, they could have perhaps just been as dangerous as the enemy. The commander of the now famous human marines challenged the emperor of the Fur EU in single combat. The alien was stunned, and seeing us only as small creatures, accepted the challenge with a laugh of dismissal. The human flicked the blade down, and it embedded itself into the stage, vibrating for a moment. Of course, the emperor was fighting a marine. Kihi, along with the rest of the aliens, smiled, and a smattering of laughter filtered through the crowd. The prowess of the human warriors was well known, and nearly unmatched, although few marines were human anymore. When he won, Commander Voskos had the Fur EU Emperor at knife point, by his own blade, the one you see in front of you. He offered an ultimatum. Key's eyes widened, and she looked at the object. It was the knife that had begun it all, if the human was to be believed. Instead of killing the man and rightfully taking command of the Empire, Commander Voskos did something unprecedented in Fur EU culture. He helped his opponent up and offered him more power under the condition he listened to new ideas. Voskos promised the Emperor that he and his warriors would never have to want for battle. He promised that they would be able to fight for righteousness against the ultimate foe. The human leaned down, and fumbling slightly with the heavy gloves he was wearing, pulled the knife out of the stage. So contrary to our fictions, the most violent race of aliens we could find besides the enemy, submitted to learn from us. The human put the knife away and pulled out a small wooden branch, one that had several dozen lengths of cloth tied to it. Humanity continued this pattern, bringing races and species together under our banner, not by impressing on them our own ideals, but by understanding them to the best of our abilities and appealing to that. I, at the age of 20, was part of the contingent that negotiated with the Flareon. A princess with spikes, poisonous spurs, and acidic blood gifted me this promissory to seal their allegiance to humanity after one of my greatest friends sacrificed himself in one of their religious ceremonies to call upon their gods. The human placed a stick on the podium. As we gathered species under our banner and tried to organize every resource, we took it upon ourselves to execute the brutal mathematics of war. I do not envy the leaders of humanity at the time. As we amassed allies and power, we willfully ignored billions. We consciously left billions of men, women, and children to be consumed by the enemy. We tried to save as many as we could, but even so, the galaxy lost nearly 5,000 species, 5,000 unique perspectives, entire histories and people who now only exist in the libraries of humanity. The human held the stick up, and the cloth on it bellowed in the wind. The Flareon are amongst those lost. The human sighed, and the entire stadium was silent for a moment. Stunned by the speech, Key nearly fell back onto her haunches. Shaking her head and looking for a distraction, she glanced down at Ola, or at least where he was supposed to be. The mottling was absent from his small perch. Jerking around, Key looked for him in the crowd. The mathematics of war are brutal. We should not be forgiven for letting those species burn. I can only say that it was the only way that we could win. And, to this day, what is left of humanity regrets it. Key straightened up, looking for her sibling, barely managing to stop herself from calling out. When the enemy reached the system, we, humanity, and the 40,000 species we allied with attacked. The warlike, the moderate, the peaceable, each fought and served alongside humanity. The warlike humans sacrificed and burned in joyous glee with the warrior species. The moderate humans planned alongside the knowledgeable generals of the very army and coordinated support for the army of trillions. The peaceable remained in the background, with those who swore never to take life and healed the injured, cured the sick, and fought to save every life possible. The human drew in a shaky breath. I was nearly 50 when this took place. Most humans of fought were raised alongside the allies of humanity and were alien themselves, something humanity took joy in. The enemy, as simple as they were, as powerful as they were, only lost due to overconfidence. Trillions died in that battle, and in a last spiteful move, the enemy laid a curse on humanity. The human virus. The human tapped his helmet. They understood in their last moments what had defeated them, and took revenge. I hesitated to call anything pure evil, but the enemy is close. The human held up his hand and clenched it off for a moment in his suit. They took it all away. A virus harmful only to humanity, lethal within a day. Every species is a carrier, every form of life save our own. We are once again relegated to a single world, outnumbered not even 1 billion out of what was once trillions. The many allies we formed can do nothing but watch as we lament. The human drew himself up. As horrible as the virus is, it shows how little the enemy understood. We have passed along our thoughts, our ideas. Ever since that day of the enemy's defeat, the people of this galaxy have strived to learn from and understand one another. You see us as a model, and I tell you with certainty, you will surpass humanity. Do not give up your own ways, but do not hesitate to learn from others. Some ways are better, some worse. All are different, and you can, at the very least, strive to understand. Even if my species should pass into darkness, the spirit of humanity will not die. The human punched his soft talon into the air, and Key now desperately searched the crowd, only half listening to the alien, desperate to find her sibling, glanced up. Above the human in the rafters of the stage, a familiar ball of feathers and enthusiasm moved, nearly all eyes locked on it, with the human's impromptu pointing. Key's feathers went flat in horror. Above the human was Ola, his generator once again loose from its strap, and the contraption fell and hit the stage next to the human. The suited human paused and looked down, before glancing with the rest of the crowd to stare at the same spot as Key. As if sensing the attention, Ola dropped, letting go of the metal beams, and mottling plummeted towards the floor. The human quickly stepped under him and caught the foolish child, barely straining to take the mottling's weight. "Ola!" Key gasped. The human looked out at her and then back at the small mottling, who was staring back at him with all four eyes. The god's two large towel glanced at me and then the human, unsure what to do. "Well, hello. Who are you?" asked the human, looking at Ola. His words were slightly muffled, the speaker in his helmet further away from the microphone, although the entire stadium had gone quiet enough that it was hardly needed. "I'm human," squeaked Ola. He began to push away through the crowd towards the stage. "You're human?" In response, Ola slowly reached up and drew the mask on top of his head down. The human chuckled. "It seems you are human indeed." The human turned back to the podium, and looking out at the crowd for a moment, seemed to come to some sort of decision. "Ola, what makes you human?" The mottling, ignoring the crowd to stare at the face of the aliens he idolized, thought for a moment. "My, face?" He pointed to the cheap plastic mask. "Perhaps. What else?" asked the human, with his teeth showing. Ola let out a warble that was amplified through the microphone he was almost sitting on. The sound reverberated through the aliens in the stadium. Key was still fighting through the crowd to retrieve her brother, was almost at the stage. "I want to know more. I want to learn about things that are strange and see them for myself." "Well then, Ola, I have a treat for you." Reaching up, the human grabbed his helmet before the bodyguards on the sides of the stage could react. The human removed it. The stadium, which had been quiet before, was deathly silent as the seals released, and the human lifted the protective helmet away and dropped it to the stage. Taking Ola's small talon, the human raised it to his face. Ola let out a low bleat as he felt the human's wrinkled face. You're gonna die now," squeaked Ola, even as he felt the human skin wonderment still in his voice. The human laughed, and he stepped forwards towards the microphone. "I'm old, Ola. I remember the times before we had to wear these things, when we were free to explore. The enemy has only made it more difficult for us. They tried to take away so much. Were we anything but human, we would be bitter for having our dreams ripped away. But it only made the dreams of exploring more arduous." Lifting the mottling up, the human placed the light-feathered creature on his shoulder and turned to the crowd. "I am old. I cannot bear to be separated from the dream." Key was like every other alien, frozen now, at the edge of the stage. Ola, his talons going through the human's hand now, looked down into the human's eyes and looked up. What do you want to explore?" asked Ola. "Tell me about your world, Ola. Show me what your world is like as my last adventure. That way we can both be human." The little mottling slowly blinked his four eyes. "Okay, can my sister help?" The human smiled. I hope so." End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.